Our story begins, as most stories do, with the words once upon a time. Once upon a time, in the land of Eden, a new age was dawning. Here is where magic and the knights of old contend with the harbingers of this new age, technology, and the gunslinger, where heaven's clouds are made of gunsmoke. I'd ask you to come and listen now to the tales of those brave enough to ride the frontier, and that you remember that for good or for ill, life is ever onward bound.
See this now, and see it well. A seldom-traveled road in a western part of the frontier called Dead Man's Walk. It was here that two souls faced each other in the old-fashioned showdown, even though such rituals were dying. One was a man dressed in fine clothes, not gaudy enough to mark him as a dandy, but as a city boy plain and true. His name was Corlett. He fancied himself a highwayman, a fact which brought no end of amusement to his opponent, who waited 20 paces away with a cigarillo dangling from her lips.
It's your dance, Corlett. Play the music.
In the tradition of our fathers, we shall draw on the count of 3. Will that suffice?
She took one last drag of her smoke and flicked it away. Her cool blue eyes watched him. She waited.
I know my numbers.
Very well. 1.
1 moment ago, her hands had been at her sides. Now they were holding 2 of the deadliest shooting irons in all the frontier. Those same guns were trained on Corlett, who lay bleeding but alive. If they fired again, they would mean his death.
I'd stay where you are, partner. You don't want to aggravate those nasty shoulder wounds.
You cheater! You didn't observe the rules of fair combat.
Fair? Pal, let me tell you a few things about the art of a showdown. Some raggedy jack wants to shoot you, you don't give him the chance just because he wants to count first.
She kicked aside the folds of his coat. He carried not guns, but twin ironwood rods that glowed faintly even in the noonday sun. Wands.
Especially if he's a magician.
She divested him of his belt and tossed it to the side, careful not to disturb the wands or any other arcane paraphernalia stashed therein.
Andrew Corlett, you're wanted for armed robbery, theft, and being a black-hearted, gutless son of a worm. I claim your bounty.
You're a bounty hunter?
For today, anyway. I was running low on coin, and it is either bring you in or chop wood on the dirt farms. And I hate chopping wood.
Corlett looked up at the lady gunslinger who had shot him down. Hair only 3 shades removed from the sky above danced in the wind. Her eyes, like blue ice, regarded him in disgust.
Who are you?
Name's Serrata, but most folks call me Blue. Howdy.
Panda Rage Productions presents Onward Bound, The Ballad of Serrata Blue, Episode 1, The Reckoning, by Derek Chen. It was evening in Candlewick, a small farming town in the Westlands. The storm had rolled in as dusk had settled, but there were no complaints from the farmer folk. It had been a thirsty month for both of them and their crops. The Black Bear Inn was packed, as folks drank to welcome the first spring rain, an old frontier custom. Hardly a soul noticed as a stranger walked in, cursing up a storm and shaking water out of her blue ponytail.
It's raining cats, dogs, horses, and damn mules out there.
Blue was in a foul mood. She had to spend half the day riding with a trussed-up spell slinger in tow. The bounty hunter office was run by gnomes, born bureaucrats, and by the time she received her pay, the storm had set in. Neither Blue nor her horse Veritas wanted to chance the road in a downpour, so she decided she could afford a decent night's stay in town. In fact, she deserved it.
Come in. We've got hot food, strong drinks, and warm rooms. Just not a fit night for man or beast.
Just my luck, Innkeeper. I'm neither. 2-shot coffee, if you please. I ain't getting any warmer.
Aye, on its way. May I interest you in...
If you're about to say victuals, Innkeeper, you most certainly may. How much will that run me?
That's 3 coppers for the grub, but the toddy's on the house, lassie.
I'm much obliged to you. Best thing to happen to me all day.
I can tell that much from the looks of you, lass.
Is that right?
I've been running the Black Bear for more than 20 years, and you learn to read the troubles on a body's face, even if they be a stranger.
I suppose I do look a mite ghastly. Comes with the territory, I suppose.
I haven't seen you around before. You a merchant or a trader?
Of a sort. I deal in lead.
Oh, you're a bounty hunter then.
Among other things, you could say so. That a problem?
The innkeeper shrugged as he went back to cleaning a mug.
Makes no difference to me, lass. We get all sorts of folks out this way, honest and otherwise. I take some money as long as they don't tell me what they had to do to get it. Coin's coin, no matter how it comes to the purse.
Blue smiled grimly as she heard that old frontier adage. The farther away you got from central cities, St. Graves, St. Avon, Magnus, and the like, the harder you had to work for coin. Honest coin, anyway.
Fair enough. Now, was I hearing right when you spoke of rooms for rent?
Oh, aye, 'tis a silver from the night. Less'n you're looking to stir up a ruckus. In that case, it's a full gold piece. Security deposit, don't you know?
Here's your silver, innkeeper. I've had enough trouble for one day. I ain't gonna be looking for no more.
Thank you. Room's up the stairs, and you're welcome to the cleanest one you can find. Right now, the show's about to start, and I don't think you'll want to be missing it.
Every eye in the Black Bear's common room was on a small stage in the south corner. A young woman stood there, her long hair the color of forest leaves, her dusky skin almost bronze in the lamplight. Her ears had a taper to them, suggesting elfish heritage, and adding an exotic flavor to her already stunning beauty. Her lips formed a pink smile, and her emerald eyes danced with laughter. For a moment she stood before the breathless audience, radiant in the torchlight, and then she began to sing. The song was beautiful, sad, and haunting. It spoke of lost love, loneliness, and fleeting hope. Most folks didn't dare even breathe as her voice lilted through the air.
That Ninya sure can sing, can't she?
Blue didn't answer, her breath stolen away as she found herself lost in the girl's song, drifting to a place where memories and voices from the past joined in the chorus. One of the inn's scullery boys began to walk amongst the crowd with a wicker basket in his dirty hands. It was nearly full of hard coin from the pockets of enraptured farmers. To her surprise, Blue found herself dipping into her own purse. The boy scurried off as Nenya's song drew to a close. As the last note echoed off the inn's walls, Blue came back to herself, feeling a little foolish for getting soft over a song.
Must be more tired than I thought.
Nenya had stepped down from the stage, and she was nearly swallowed by a throng of adoring townfolk. Behind her, the boy was handing a basket to the young man standing near the stage. If Blue was the easily impressed kind, she'd have thought him handsome, with his dark auburn hair and hazel eyes. But instead, she saw the way he leaned against the wall, trying hard to blend into the crowd, not to be noticed. His eyes kept darting about as if searching the room, waiting, watching.
I guess that would be the Pied Piper.
You say something, lass.
That man in the corner, innkeep. Who is he?
Him? Oh, that begat it. Says he's Ninya's manager, but the talk is that they're lovers as well.
Well, ain't that sweet.
Blue watched the young man from behind her second cup of coffee. He seemed agitated, on edge, and in a few moments later, she realized why.
Out of the way!
Business
Harness men coming through.
2 men approached the singers and her consort, shoving townfolk out of their way. One of them was big, over 7 foot tall, with a craggy, fanged face that meant one thing: orc.
Damn, it never fails.
They had entered sometime during Nenya's performance, and from the looks of their weapons, they were definitely not farmer folk. Blue silently berated herself for not noticing them earlier, but kept silent. Garrett had been trying to pull Nenya away from the crowd, but now it was too late. The beauty's face was mired in fear as she saw them.
It's all right, Nenya. Just stay calm.
The orc bared his fangs in a toothy grin. It was gruesome.
Right. Stay calm, little one. There ain't no reason to get all excited like.
The orc's companion, a lanky man festooned with scars and tattoos, rested one hand on the hilt of a wicked-looking sword, and the other on the butt of a holstered pistol.
That's right, Rolthank. We're just gonna have a little talk, like civilized folk.
Rolthank, Kedger, pleasure to see you again.
His words were full of fire and spit, but Blue could see the very real fear behind the young man's eyes.
Stir the niceties, Gat. You know why we're here.
Indeed I do. The Black Bear's known the frontier for its lovely chicken stew. You should try some.
Rolthank's blows sent Garrett spinning over the table, scattering patrons and furniture. Nenya made to rush to his side, but Kedger grabbed her slender arm and yanked her back.
Stay calm, little girl. Your sugar boy just picked a bad time to try stand-up comedy.
The pit take both of you, you filthy sons of whores.
He ain't so funny lying down neither, Kedger.
Well then, it's a good thing we won't have to listen to him on the way back.
Garrett had begun to draw his sword, but a loud click announced Kedger had his pistol out. Blue watched all of this from the seat at the bar.
Innkeeper?
Aye?
A gold piece spun through the air. Even in his fear, the innkeeper had the brains to catch it. Meanwhile, Nenya struggled in the grasp of the orc. White with terror, Garrett stared grimly down the barrel of Kedger's pistol.
We could pay the same if we bring just the girl, and I see no reason to have to hold this one all the way back.
It was at this point that a mug still half full of spiked coffee connected with the back of Kedger's head. To his credit, the thug didn't pass out, but he did drop his gun as he turned a clumsy pirouette and landed on the wooden floor.
Maybe y'all can help me with a little dilemma I'm having.
Kedger groggily hauled himself to his feet as Rolthank uttered a savage growl. They had forgotten Nenya, and the girl immediately went to Garrett's side.
This ain't none of your concern, girlie. We got business with Pretty Boy here.
La-dee-da, princess, I don't care. I've had one hell of a day, and all I want is a stiff drink, some overpriced grub, and a nice, quiet evening. So either you two daisy wavers take it elsewhere, or we get to doing the two-fist hoedown.
Rolthank's response was a growl of rage and the drawing of an orcish war blade. It was a knife in orcish hands, but a meat cleaver to anyone else. Kedger's own sword was out as well, and a wicked-looking dagger replaced his lost gun.
All right, then. Let me just put on my dancing shoes.
Now, it's one thing to be a gunslinger out in the frontier. A good shooting iron and the wits to use them can make the difference between life and death. However, there is something to be said for the fine art of scrapping. Early in life, Blue had learned the value of holding her own in a brawl. She even spent a few years learning from the best.
Out of the way, Rolthank, I'll share this bed what for.
As such, he could kick like a mule and bite like a crocodile. Kedger went down first after catching Blue's boot heel across his jaw.
I'm gonna hurt you, I am.
Rolthank was a different story.
Hold still.
Thing is, no one expects a human woman to be as mean and as ornery as an orc.
Where is she? Where is she?
It's like my old friend Sam used to say. There's few problems a couple good whacks with a bar stool wouldn't solve.
As Rolthank slumped heavily to the ground, Blue whirled about, eyes peeled for anyone else looking to rumble. All she saw was stunned bar patrons, and that Garrett and Nenya were nowhere about.
You stupid kid. There's never just two of them.
During the brawl, Garrett had bolted, dragging Nenya along. Even though the crazy blue-haired lady had saved them, she seemed only to be slightly less dangerous than the pair of hunters she plummeled. Sticking around to say thank you didn't seem prudent. The rain had let up some, but it had turned most of Candlewick streets into a hog waller. As they dashed around the corner, Nenya slipped in the mud-slick streets.
Nenya!
The young woman desperately tried to get to her feet, but the mud and her own panic made it difficult.
Come on, you've got to get up. We've got to. Run.
A horse and rider stood watching, waiting in the streets. The rider was clad all in white, seemingly untouched by the rain. He was bald, with a white leather patch over his left eye.
Garrett Padron, stand and be judged.
The white rider's hand dipped to his side and drew a terrible blade. It had a slight curve to it. The metal itself was black, and it glowed with an unholy light. He began to gallop toward them.
Hold on to me, Nenya. Close your eyes.
The girl did as she was told, as Garrett drew his own sword, as well as a small pistol. He would fight, but a part of him knew that his time had run out. Both of theirs had. The terrible sword went spinning into the mud. Its owner brought its mare to a halt. Garrett looked up and saw Serrata Blue standing there. In her right hand was a silvery gun that almost seemed to glow, and in her left was one as black as night. Her eyes were like ice.
I don't miss, partner. It was a sword or your horse, and I got no reason to shoot an innocent creature. Whatever beef you got with this kid, you'll have to deal with it another night.
Blue felt the man's lone eye fix on her. It unsettled her a great deal, but she didn't waver an inch.
I ain't never shot a man in the back, so as long as you keep yours to me, you can ride on with no fuss. Your move.
After a moment, the rider pulled his horse back and around, pausing only to retrieve his weapon. The black sword flew from where it had landed and right into his waiting hand. He gave the three of them a backward glance and a parting word.
Be seeing you.
And then he rode on. Blue did not holster her guns until he was well out of sight. As she did so, she looked at the two people whose lives she had saved twice that night. Nenya had buried her face in Garrett's chest, and he looked up at Blue, shock and awe like a beacon on his face. His hands had never left his sword. It was still sheathed and would remain so for the rest of the night. They were safe.
Well, I reckon you owe me a drink, partner.
An hour later, Blue sat in the small room Garrett and Nenya shared at the Black Bear. The innkeeper at first refused to let them back in, especially Blue. But Garrett, handing over their night's earnings, seemed to square things and even gain them a bottle of fine dwarfish whiskey. Nenya slept, the excitement and the terror having been too much for her. Meanwhile, Blue watched Garrett through the smoke of her cigarillo.
So, former soldier, huh?
How'd you know?
That's a service saber you got on your hip there, Garrett. Though I can tell that pistol's a personal choice. I wouldn't use it in a fight, so you've practiced some, though. The way you hold it, the recoil will break your wrist. Not to mention the holster's too big.
You're right, I suppose. I bought it in Ramshackle only 2 months ago.
Ramshackle. You've been heading westward, then?
Yes, that we have.
What's in the east that's got you on the run?
I don't know what you're...
Garrett, I've saved your damn life twice tonight, and I don't even know you. I reckon that earns me some truth.
You're right.
Garrett poured himself a cup from the now half-empty bottle. He took a long pull and began his story.
I left the Night Corps 3 years ago. Being a foot soldier in a land with no wars to fight didn't bring much excitement and even less pay. I thought I'd try my hand at being a mercenary. I was able to find work as a bodyguard for Count Vostok in Rockland on the East Coast.
Rockland, huh? Didn't think there'd be much call for a bodyguard in fishing country.
Every place has got its seedy side. Count Vostok is a powerful man, a landowner. The money he collects from his people affords him a life of luxury. He spends most of it on fine things, paintings, sculptures, rare wines. And then one day I met the newest addition to his collection, Nenya. He'd bought her from a gangster in St. Chasset.
Bought her? So she's a slave?
Garrett nodded gravely. Slavery of any kind had been outlawed for decades. But indentured servitude was still practiced by those powerful enough to hide their illicit dealings. The word always set Blue's teeth to grinding.
His best investment, he called her. She'd fetch quite a high price, and so he made it my job to watch her at all times.
I'm guessing it went a little beyond watching, seeing as how you and she are here, far away from her count.
You might say that. You see, well, you could say that we had just fallen in love.
Touching. Keep talking.
Right. You see, Nenya's a dryad, a forest fairy.
Blue just shot the young man a look.
Son, I ain't had that much to drink.
No, it's true. That's why her singing carries such power. She's mute otherwise, but her voice is enchanted.
Well, that certainly does explain a lot. Farm folk don't usually toss that much coin around. I put 2 silver bits in myself, and I'm cheap as hell. Question is, how does a dryad find herself up for sale in a backwater fishing town?
I don't know, to be honest, and the Count didn't much care. She was just a pretty thing to him. A thing.
Garrett's hands balled into a fist, and for the first time that night, Blue had an inch of respect for him. After a moment, and another swig of whiskey, he collected himself.
At first, he just showed her off to his rich friends, like a doll that could sing. But I learned he had a more sinister fate for her. Nenya was to be gifted to his eldest son, as a Nashik. Do you know the word?
I do. It's the Islander talk for a duty wife. A concubine.
Yes. The Count's son was a monster, just a younger version of his father, except crueler and with more unwholesome appetites. I couldn't let Nenya suffer that fate, so I
took her and ran.
That was 5 months ago, and we've been running ever since. Count Vostok is a powerful man, with many men on his coin. It hasn't been easy. We stay in town long enough to earn money for supplies, and then we just keep going.
And so here you sit, Mr. White Knight, running for your life with your lady love from the evil noble.
I know it sounds a little like a fairy tale, but...
Not hardly. Those stories of old never made mention of the knight using his fair maiden to turn a pretty penny.
Garrett merely shrugged. If it was from anger, embarrassment, or both, Blue could only guess.
I've only done what was necessary to survive. A bodyguard's pay isn't that much more than a soldier's, and a plan to raid the Count's coffers went bust. As you've seen, Nenya's a little fragile. She's just not capable of fending for herself.
So, where are you headed? All the running in the world doesn't do you a bit of good if you ain't running somewhere.
We're trying to get to the Grand Forest, where there's a portal to the Elvish realm of home. Do you know of home?
I know it. You thinking the High Elves will take pity on you?
They might accept Nenya at the least. As for myself, well, once she's out of his reach, the Count may decide I'm not worth the trouble.
That's a hefty gamble there, Garrett. The Grand Forest is many leagues away. You figure you can keep outrunning his hench bunnies? That was a damn close call you had earlier.
You think this is my first choice? We've been lucky we made it this far, but I'm one man, and the Count's men dog our steps, getting closer each time. We're running out of options, so it's this or die.
The exhaustion and desperation lined Garrett's face in the firelight glow. Blue said nothing for a while, just sat there puffing on her cigarillo.
You'll need to head through the westward wild, then. It's the fastest way.
Yes, but the wild elves that inhabit those woods are unfriendly towards men, they say.
Well, that's as may be, but it goes a lot smoother if you ride with someone familiar with their ways.
Like who?
Take a wild guess, son.
You know the ways of a wild elf?
You could say we're on good terms. They ain't looking to make me their queen or nothing. But I reckon I can get you speedy passage through there.
You mean you'll help us?
Don't get gushy. I'm heading down that road myself, so I suppose it won't do me any harm to show you the way.
I'm grateful. If we go that route, I have friends that can meet us on the other side. They'll be grateful too, I expect. They'll see that you're rewarded for the protection.
Son, you don't know me, so I'm going to tell you this once.
There was steel in Blue's voice now, and Garrett felt silent.
You need a clear road? I'm your gal. I won't turn down the odd coin if I've earned it by then, but I'm no hired gun.
I see. Thank you.
Blue doused her smoke and took a final slug of whiskey.
Save your thanks and your energy. We leave tonight.
Tonight? But...
Son, you want my help, you play by my rules. You do what I say, I keep you alive. Square?
All right. You're the boss.
Damn straight. You wake Nenya, pack up your troubles, and meet me downstairs in an hour.
Yes, of course. But is there such need for urgency?
There always is when you're on the run. With that white rider still on the loose, you can't be too careful.
He seemed easy enough to deal with earlier.
That's what worries me.
What do you mean?
Whoever that man was, Garrett, he did not ride off because he was scared of us. Mark me. Time for yapping's done. 1 hour.
While Blue made preparations, others held Congress that night. Kedger and Rothank sat grumpily in an abandoned barn on the outskirts of town. They narrowly escaped capture by the town's authorities, and now awaited the last member of their group.
I don't like this. We know they's out there. We should go and port him.
Simmer down, Rothank. We don't make a move without Najin.
Waiting for me.
Though both of the men were hard-bitten hirelings, they still jumped at the voice coming from the shadowy corners. The white rider called Najin stepped out from therein.
My thanks for your indulgence. Please continue.
Right. I was telling Rothank we could head the lot of them off at Mercy Bridger. They'd like it headed around the wild and...
No.
Come again?
They'll take the woodland road. That much is certain. Through elf country? Pah! Those spirit elves never give them passage. Have you forgotten what the girl is? Elves, even wild ones, hold the forest sprites in very high regard. It'll likely be enough.
Then Rothank's right. We should head them off now before...
They're likely gone. They'll be moving fast now that they know we're here. It matters little. The boy and the Dryad are no longer your concern. I will retrieve them.
What are you on about? Our job is to get the girl, and the kid's your strife. Our boss
is not here. I allowed you two to come this far, but now I claim your task as my own. So that's how it is. We're gonna go back empty-handed and let you hog a hole?
Before Rothank could react, the rider struck him with his blade. The orc could feel the terrible coldness growing from where the sword had touched him. Kedger watched as his companion began to shake violently and then sink to the floor. Najin watched as the orc twitched for a moment, then turned to Kedger, his blade ready to further respond to any disputes.
There was no call for that, Najin. We was just getting...
In my younger days, I would have let the blade's edge kiss him instead of its flat. But his energies are better spent elsewhere. Hear me. You will return to your master now and advise him his prize is forthcoming.
What's going into you? I thought your kind never liked changing plans.
The situation has changed them for us. They've acquired a bodyguard.
What, the Bluebird? She's a tough one, yeah? All the more reason Rothank and I should stay about. We can handle her.
The same way you handled her earlier?
She just caught us unawares is all. Now that we know about...
Enough!
Najin's gruesome blade seemed to glow brighter. Kedger fell silent.
Listen well. My road lies toward the Dryad, the boy, and especially the gunslinger. If you put yourselves in that road, you will find yourself removed from it in a very unpleasant manner. Are we clear?
Yeah. Yeah, we're clear. We'll set out at dawn.
As will I. The hunt begins.
Dawn had just broken as Blue and her troop made their way through the westward wild. Here was one of the most beautiful places in the entire frontier. The wild was pleasing to the eye, yes, but it was so densely foliated they had to go on foot and lead their horses. Blue's gray stallion, Veritas, followed her with little fuss. The roan, Garrett, and Nenya had been riding, however, refused to cooperate, and he had to be nearly dragged along.
Should have let that fella go before we entered. Horses don't seem to like the wild too much.
Yours seems content enough.
Veritas here? He's a special case. See, the horse thinks I'm his partner, which is only a half-lie. He goes where I go. After all, he's so lazy. Who else will get him his damned apples? Hush, you.
It was then that the roan finally had enough of Garrett's insistence, yanked its reins from his hands.
Whoa, you mangy!
The horse galloped off, leaving Garrett sputtering in the dust.
It's probably best. Poor thing was so spooked it was slowing us down. Y'all can get another one later anyways.
Do you expect that the Wild Elves will have horses to offer us strange folk?
There's a town, Green Willow Village, at the end of the wild. Plenty of mounts available there. And by, it's best not to call them wild elves. They don't take kindly to it.
Is that right?
To the Kaidu elves, wild means uncivilized. They're probably more decent than some frontiers folk.
If they're so decent, why do they hide from us? They're probably watching us right now, aren't they? It feels like it.
The boy has a brain in his head, at least. Or is it paranoia?
Most folk had never seen a Kadu elf before, for they rarely ventured out of their realm. Whereas their high elf cousins had fair skin, they were tanned and weathered from a life of walking in the forest, protecting it. The one who had spoken was all clad in black, with raven's feathers in his hair and a wicked-looking bow slung across his back. He stood with his arms folded across his chest and an irritated look on his face.
Such behavior betrays a guilty conscience, an unquiet soul.
The trio found themselves surrounded as the legendary elves of the Westward Wild seemed to materialize from the very greenery. It was a small group of 6, but they all carried weapons and were adorned with tribal tattoos.
Bloody hell.
Best to hobble your lip, boy. You're just making noise. Greetings, Corwin.
Serrata Blue, you're looking well, despite the fact you're still wearing men's clothes.
Nice to see you haven't changed. You still look like I just found a maggot in your meat.
More than just a bit unnerved, Garrett hissed into Blue's ear.
I don't think it's a good idea to irritate an elf, especially if it's a wild elf, and the first of 5 other armed wild elves.
Unclench yourself. Corwin and I go way back. See the sour look on his face and how his hand is twitching near his longbow? That there's how the Caddo elves show friendship. Ain't that right, Cor?
Yes, of course. We're recording, blood would have been spilled by now.
I see.
The time for levity, or what one might call levity, had passed. Corwin raised his hand, and his fellows lowered their weapons. They all approached the group, the need for subterfuge gone. They all watched Nenya with a sense of wonder. Dryads were rare in the Westward Wilds, so much so that they had been thought to join the other creatures of myth. Meanwhile, Blue and Corwin spoke quickly.
Te ayadravak sintol, no moranek?
Seyanha, Ayadravanek, and Komunamek.
Manaksat eha.
This exchange continued a while longer, and ended with an exasperated look from Blue and a nod from Corwin. He left to address his fellows, and Garrett quickly went to Blue.
What was all that about?
Don't fret none. Me and Corwin just catching up. Looks like he's as damn stubborn as ever.
What do you mean?
Corwin returned to them and fixed a steely eye on Garrett.
You shall be my personal guest here in the wilds, Garrett Padrain.
What?
This ain't necessary, Corwin. All's we're looking for is safe passage.
And you shall have it, with our help.
Well, thank you. I'm grateful for...
As such, you will stay within my sight at all times, do nothing without my leave, and everything as you are commanded. Are we clear?
Garrett balked at the iron in the elf's voice, and the dangerous look in his eye. In the end, he could only nod.
Excellent. Welcome to the Westwood Wilds.
With that, Corwin went off to issue commands to his fellows. Blue started to light a cigarillo, remembering where she was, and then thought better of it.
That man terrifies me.
That just means Corwin likes you.
Really?
Actually, no, he probably hates your guts. I was just trying to make you feel better, but you had to go get all nosy.
Fantastic.
Come along. The wild awaits.
The rest of the morning was a hard hike through the wild, though it seemed easier in the company of the Caddo elves. They knew the secret paths and hidden passages that others would never see. At noon, they rested in the shade of a mighty oak tree. Garrett and Nenya sleeping hard, having lost the previous night. Blue allowed herself to rest as well, something she usually had trouble doing. Even so, they allowed only a few hours to pass before setting back out. The sun was just beginning its descent when they came to an open field in the dense wood. Corwin sent his fellow rangers on to scout the area, and he, Blue, Garrett, and Nenya made their way through the tall grass. Nenya kept racing forward to marvel at the wonders of the wild, Garrett struggling to keep up with her. Blue and Corwin hung back, keeping them in sight as they palavered.
All right, Corwin, you're looking mighty troubled, even for you. What have you got stuck in your craw?
I had hoped, Serrata Blue, that you had understood that the friendship of the Westwood Wilds extends to you and only a chosen few.
That I do. I ain't never forgotten what I had to do that day to earn it, neither.
It's not your honor I question, but rather your wisdom. Why bring this boy here?
If you had trouble hearing me tell the story earlier, Corwin Blackfeather, you might have said so then.
My ears work fine. Other than dishonesty sets them ill at ease.
You saying I'm a liar?
Of course not. This particular tale was told to you by Garrett, and I do not trust that one.
I can see that. Then again, you don't trust many folks, do you?
I trust what my soul senses about them. That boy's hiding something from us.
Oh, hell yes, he is. I wasn't raised no fool.
Then why?
Blue nodded toward Nenya, who was presently watching the butterflies in the field. Garrett let her play, but still stayed close, wary.
She's an innocent, plain and true. I can tell because I'm so familiar with the other kind of folks. If the boy's mixed up in something awful, I have an itch to find out what that is before we split roads.
You human folk and your sentimentality. Just remember, the boy has secrets. And in our tongue, secret is just another word for lie.
Is that right? What's the word for uptight, sour-faced cuss? I'm betting it's Corwin.
The wild elf was about to retort when he suddenly stopped, snapping his head back toward the way they came.
Blue.
I hear it, too. How long we got?
Minutes. I don't know how many.
What happened to Anzi, Mari, and Koru?
As Blue spoke the names of the 3 rangers who had gone to watch their back trail, Corwin froze. Regret and sorrow flashed across his face, for he now sensed the fate of his fellows.
They're already dead.
Blue saw the pain in her friend's eyes, but knew now was not the time for grieving. She whirled about and shouted to Garrett and Nenya.
Saddle up. We got company.
At the edge of the clearing, the white rider Najin watched them with his lone gray eye. His black sword's terrible glow blazed as he raised it and spoke one word.
Burn.
He swung his weapon once before him, and a sheet of white flame raged from its arc. This was no normal fire. It tore through the tall grass like a living thing and hunted its prey. Blue and Corwin almost felt it before they saw it. Garrett and Nenya jumped back as the flames arched out to surround them. The magic fire trapped them in a fist of heat and smoke. Blue fought to keep Veritas under control, but the flames spooked her mount.
Easy, boy. Easy.
Though she was near blinded by smoke, Blue drew a pistol. As her ears hunted for sign of her enemy, it wasn't long until... Najin, bursting through a wall of flame like a ghost, his own horse ignoring the sorcerer's fire. His sword was raised as it bore down on Blue. Her aim spoiled by surprise and smoke, Blue's bullets whizzed past the white rider. She saw his blade and knew it was meant for her first. Moments before his strike, her hand dipped to the side of Veritas' harness. Najin found his sword locked against another blade, one whose like he had never seen before. The saber in Blue's hand was of elfish design, but the craftsmanship was dwarfish. He allowed himself a moment's admiration.
You have some skill with a blade. I'm impressed.
Yeah, I'm full of surprises. I can play the banjo, too.
Blue kept the white rider at bay, though swordplay had never been her strength. She had little choice. Her pistols were useless in close quarters. Najin had the advantage, and he knew it.
By what name do you call your blade? Mine is the Reaper.
I just call mine Sword.
That's a pity. Names are power, Serrata Blue.
You know me?
Stories and folk songs mostly. They speak of a would-be heroine who swoops in to save the meek and innocent. Fairy tales, it sounds like.
Can't believe all them stories, partner. They'll rot your brain.
Blue finally saw an opening. She deflected the terrible blade and laid a wicked punch across Najin's jaw, sending them both off their horses and into the grass. As Najin hit the ground, the flames around them died out. Blue rolled to her feet and saw that Garrett was already on the run, dragging Nenya along with him. Corwin was nowhere to be seen.
Just great.
She had dropped her sword, and as she grabbed for it, she had to avoid Najin's blade as it arched toward her, seeking her head. The white rider's fury smoldered in his one eye.
Take care not to believe your own legend. Playing protector to a miscreant in this ill-gained doxy doesn't make you some sort of guardian angel.
I never claimed to be no angel, but I sure ain't hell ain't no devil neither.
Nothing is as it seems. The boy's undeserving of your mercy, of anyone's mercy.
I reckon that means little to me.
Oh, if you only knew. Did he tell you his fanciful tale of fleeing in the night with his lady love from the evil noble? Did he tell you that the evil noble was an old man who wanted nothing more than to have a beautiful song sung to him in his latter days?
Blue brought her sword up to lock with Najin's. Unreal strength seemed to flow from the White Rider.
Did he tell you what he had to do in order to escape? Did he tell you what I am?
The rider tore his white leather patch from his eye, and Blue's blood chilled in her veins. There was an empty socket filled with inky darkness. A small red light glowed within, like a dying ember in a sea of black.
I am Oscillus Sancor, those who bring balance to the world. We corrupt our flesh as we do the instruments of our trade. It is dark magic that gives us strength, as we repay blood for blood.
Najin kept forcing her back, his blade coming down again and again, and she did all she could to defend herself, even though he soon found an opening and slashed the blade across her thigh. Ah! The pain was intense, though the wound was shallow. Blue went down to one knee. Najin brought his sword down again and laid another wicked gash across her left arm. Ah! The blade came down a third time, and Blue barely blocked it. Their weapons locked. Najin began to force her down, stopping only to hiss in her ear.
Mine is not the only blade stained with innocence around Blue.
Blue felt herself growing weaker, the black glowing steel inches from her face. The White Rider spun back as bolts of mystical force slammed into him. Corwin, who had escaped the fire, stood next to the burning brush, his enchanted longbow at the ready. He pulled back an arrow, and when he let it fly, it became a white bolt of arcane power. The elven archer's attack forced Najin away from Blue. The White Rider weathered the assault, and soon began cutting the mystic bolts from the very air. He made his approach, but Corwin stood his ground.
Yaranha! Back to the pit, you foul demon!
Najin smiled a terrible smile at Corwin, his demon eye blazing scarlet.
The pit holds no surprises for me, Elf.
And then Najin was upon him. His magic bow no longer of use, Corwin brought up his long knife. Its own meager enchantment proved useless, as the dark sword of Najin cleft it in twain, and then buried itself in his shoulder.
And what will it hold for you, I wonder?
Corwin sank to the ground, as the cursed blade stole the very warmth from his blood. The edges of his vision began to grow dark until... The assassin turned, leaving Corwin alive but weakened.
Najin!
Blue had recovered, cold fury numbing the pain in her shoulder. She had drawn both her pistols, and he could see them now for what they were.
You're right. Names are power. These be high noon and midnight. Say howdy, boys.
The White Rider spun about in a macabre ballet as Blue's bullets found their mark. In his time, Najin had been stabbed, shot, and once impaled, but he had never experienced pain as he did now, the bullets burning him from within. But he still stood, black blood streaming from his wounds as he faced Blue.
It would seem you carry a bit of magic yourself.
Just 2 good irons, partner, and the wits to use them.
I see. You know, I've never left a contract unfulfilled. I used to come very highly recommended.
Don't let it get you down. Everybody has a bad day.
Najin sank to the ground, his dark sword joining him. Its energies flickered, and then finally fading. Blue watched Najin's still form for a while, but soon her leg gave out again. She sat on the ground heavily as Corwin crawled over to her.
Are you all right?
Well, I'm half choked on smoke. I just went 3 rounds with a professional assassin, and I got a sizable hole in my leg. All things considered, I'm having a bad day. Hunt me up a bandage, would you?
A few moments later, the 3 elves Corwin had sent ahead returned. Shattuck, their healer, had much to say as he tended to their wounds.
Shattuck, ombe isse moya?
Tashi Corwin, Rosu anjek tomoru nomorunek, jinemerak rak ros.
Tomoru? Isen cord?
At this last question, Shattuck nodded gravely. Corwin turned to Blue, who was already on her feet, paying no mind to her wounds.
I heard. Let's go.
Let us handle this. You're injured.
That's as may be, but I'm also frightful ticked off. I can head them off if...
Blue stopped. She had noticed that except for the patches of vile black blood, there was no trace of Najin where he had fallen.
Ah, hell. That can't be good.
Garrett and Nenya were out of breath as they reached the other side of the westward wild. It was night now, and they could see the lights in the nearby town of Green Willow. The young man was searching about frantically.
Where are they? Where are they?
Looking for someone, partner?
Garrett whirled to see Blue stepping out of the woods. He hadn't expected her to catch up so fast, but she had the help of the elves on her side. He did his best to feign relief.
Blue, thank Dio. I thought you were lost. When that rider appeared, I panicked.
Son, I'll strap a bag to my horse's behind if I want any of that what you're trying to hand me.
Excuse me?
In response, Blue laid a wicked punch against his jaw. He stumbled back, nose bleeding.
What in the hell is wrong with you?
That man, Najin, was a still one. Order of Scylla Sancor. They ain't mercenaries and they ain't bounty hunters. Only time they'll kill for another is to avenge a blood debt. So why do you have one on your tail, huh?
I told you, I was trying to protect Nenya.
Garrett was staring right down Midnight's barrel. Nenya's eyes were wide as saucers. Blue's eyes were chips of ice.
The truth, boy. Now!
All right. What I told you before was true. I took Nenya from the Count. He was a doddering senile old fool who really didn't know what he had in his hands. He treated Nenya like...
a thing. Yeah, I got you the first time. Now tell me the part you left out, because I'm right sure there is one.
To me, she was more than a thing. She was an opportunity.
Nenya's eyes went wide. Blue's notion that the girl had been in on the deception dissipated, but it did nothing to improve her temper.
I wasn't lying about bodyguard pay being worth less than Bug Squad. I'd never had any money, not real money. And once I realized what she was worth, I couldn't take it. Why should the rich get richer and hardworking folk live like dogs?
You're breaking my heart. That ain't yet explained the White Rider.
If I'd known the old codger's son had that type of pull with Scylla Sancor, I'd have never...
Garrett stopped, reluctant to speak his crime out loud.
Say it.
Garrett finally looked up to face Blue. No longer the callow, senseless youth he had taken him for. In his eyes was darkness not unlike Najin's.
I'd have never killed that old man in his sleep.
No!
Both Blue and Garrett looked at Nenya. It was the first word either had ever heard from her when she wasn't singing.
Garrett, you didn't. Please tell me it's not true.
Nenya,
I wanted to be free, yes. I wanted to go home, but how could you have taken another man's life?
Nenya, I had to do it. He had the only key. There was no other way.
We couldn't have needed money that badly.
Need wasn't part of it, darling. Just greed. The one thing that's driven him this far.
At this, Nenya buried her face in her hands. Garrett was wrought with shame, but Blue had no pity or stomach for it.
Greed drove you to rook an innocent girl into loving you. Greed made you kill an old man in his bed. And greed made you a target for those who sought vengeance for blood spilled. You put me and mine in harm's way for greed.
You've only yourself to blame for that, Serrata Blue. See, I'd heard many stories about you. When I saw you walk into the Black Bear, I figured you were an easy out. All I had to do was give you one sob story, and you fell right into line, soft-hearted.
Blue shoved the barrel tighter into Garrett's face.
I'll tell you what I told Najin, Garrett. You can't believe all the stories you hear. You ripped me fine, I'll grant, but you got no one to hide behind any longer. And now comes reckoning. There comes a time in every man's life where there's a reckoning, and you find out just who you are and what you're made of.
That's simple enough. I'm the man who killed Serrata Blue.
A blade slid from Garrett's sleeve into his hand, and he slashed it upward. But Blue had expected such a gambit and brought her gun hand down, nearly breaking his wrist. Her other hand balled into a fist and crashed into his jaw, knocking him to the ground. Blue stood over him, high noon aimed dead center. She gritted her teeth as her own punch sent spikes of pain through her wounded arm.
Garrett Padrain, you're wanted for murder. I claim your bounty.
I have no bounty on me, you blue-haired wench.
That's as may be, but you think that'll matter once I haul your sorry carcass all the way back to Rockland?
Garrett's eyes went wide and mad with fear.
No, you're not taking me back there.
He went for his pistol, but it was gone, having fallen from its oversized holster when Blue had sent him tumbling. Nevertheless, he showed her that he indeed had been trained with a blade.
Die!
Blue easily dodged the desperate man's attacks, but she had been overconfident. She had begun to bring her pistol to bear when her hurt leg buckled under her. She stumbled. Garrett saw his opening and brought his sword down toward her. A bloody hole had sprouted on his shoulder, but Blue's gun remained unfired. Garrett's own pistol fell from Ninya's shaking fingers, tears streaming down her face.
Ninya.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I couldn't let you.
I just wanted to get you home.
Blue stood herself up, leaning against a tree for support. Her leg was on fire.
Then maybe you'll want to tell her what was waiting for y'all on this side of the wild. Those friends you mentioned back at the Black Bear.
Garrett's eyes closed as he knew his lies had finally come to an end.
No.
Garrett?
Seems there was a small group of folks waiting to make your acquaintance, little girl. Corwin's rangers found them when they scouted ahead earlier. Fancy-looking folks, nobles from Ramshackle, it looked like. They had two things, a large chest of cash and this.
Blue reached into her long coat's recesses and threw something at Garrett's feet. It was an iron muzzle and shackles, slave wear. Horror washed over Ninya at the extent of Garrett's treachery.
No, it can't be.
Ninya,
You told me you loved me.
He never meant to take you home, Nanya. He was going to sell you to another noble, just like the one he rescued you from. Right now, Corwin and his folks are educating them about the evils of slave trading.
Garrett, half mad with bloodlust, reached out a hand, trying to think of something, anything to say to justify his betrayal. In the end, there was none. Nenya, racked with sorrow and anger, turned away from him.
The game's done, Garrett. It's over.
No, not yet it's not.
With the last of his hate, Garrett hauled himself to his feet and brought his sword up.
Ah!
He lunged for Blue, but High Noon and Midnight were at the ready.
Ah!
Blue's shots had found their mark in the young man's shoulders. However, Garrett's mouth moved wordlessly as he stared down at the black sword that now jutted from his chest. Behind him was Najin, who emerged from the shadows like some phantasm. His dire wound still bled black ichor. His face showed no joy as his task was finally completed. His red demon eye glimmered in the night.
I told you, Gunslinger. I have never left a contract unfulfilled.
With that, the White Rider of Sela Sankor, the man-demon known as Najin, finally met his end. His body turned to smoke and ash where it fell. His terrible sword shattered to pieces. Garrett's face was frozen in disbelief, and Blue could see his flickering hate, his impotent rage, and perhaps regret. Then he slumped to the ground, dead. Blue leaned back against the tree, exhaustion and her wounds taking their toll. She searched for a smoke and realized she was out.
Well, that's just perfect.
2 days later, Blue was preparing to leave Green Willow Village. Having been to the local cleric, she was feeling almost human again. She lit a fresh rolled cigarillo as she neared the inn where she had been staying. Veritas was waiting for her there, as well as Corwin, whose own wounds were mending. Nenya stood silently behind him.
Morning, Corwin.
You're looking better.
I'm feeling better. The churchies fixed me up proper. Besides, it's amazing what a couple of days without getting shot at, stabbed, or burned alive will do for you. You have any trouble dealing with them folks from Ramshackle?
It'll be a very long time for any other fools coming on the wild looking for slaves.
Corwin smiled a devilish smile. Blue actually returned the grin as she rubbed her horse's muzzle.
Thanks for looking after Veritas, by the way.
He's a well-mannered beast, other than he tends to be as fussy as his master.
You just gotta know how to bribe him.
Blue reached into her pocket and pulled out a shiny red apple. Veritas nearly took off a finger as he gobbled it up.
Now, you sure the tribe elders ain't gonna be sore about that favor I asked?
The tribe's been meaning to make a pilgrimage to the Grand Forest anyhow. We'll see if our high elf kin can make a place for Nenya. Until then, she'll stay with us in the wilds.
Blue nodded approvingly. Nenya just stood quietly, lost in thought.
You gonna be all right, darling?
I suppose so. It's gonna take me a while to get used to being free, I guess.
Ain't nothing better. Now you mind Corwin, and he'll take care of you. See that you get home. I take you myself, but, well, hell, I tend to get on everyone's nerves after a while. Best to part on good terms.
Nenya smiled wanly and tried to laugh, but there was no heart in it.
It ain't gonna be easy, I'll grant you that. But you can trust Corwin and his kin, even though he always looks like he shot himself with his own arrows.
I'm standing 20 feet away from you, and elves have very good hearing, Serrata Blue. Very good hearing.
Hush, you. Girl talk.
I don't know if I can ever trust anyone again. I'm more than trusted Garrett. I loved him, Serrata. I feel like a fool for doing so.
Blue sighed, the sorrow on Nenya's once cheerful face sending regret spiking through her heart. She put a hand on the young girl's shoulder.
I ain't got the right words to say here, Nenya. I'm the wrong person for that. What I can say is that it's never foolish to love, if the object of that love is worthy of it. Love makes us blind, so we have to trust them to lead us down the right path. Sometimes it all works out. Other times, well, you learn to see what's true and what ain't. Keep that in mind.
I will.
That's a good girl. Well, I gotta set out now. Got a long road ahead of me.
Where are you going?
Blue swung herself up on Veritas's back, her azure hair blowing out from underneath her hat. She gave Nenya and Corwin a little lopsided smile.
Don't rightly know, but I'll figure it out when I get there. Yeah!
And with that, Blue kicked Veritas into a steady gallop, and he took her out of the town into the frontier and towards another day.
Onward Bound, The Ballad of Serrata Blue, Episode 1, The Reckoning, a Panda Rage production. Written and created by Derek Chen, narrated by Craig Short. Starring the vocal talents of Stephanie Short, Tom Hutner, Brent Tillotson, Jason Janes, Philip Gavigan, and Allison Corso. Recorded and produced by Red Room Sound.